meeting is being recorded.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to our class on the Nectar of Instruction, a verse by verse study course. Today is our 15th class, and we will start discussing text number 6 of this book. The theme primarily covered in this text number 6 is avoid seeing pure devotees with material vision. Let us begin the class with Mangalacharan prayers, and I would invite Her Grace Sita Sharma ji from Kuala Lumpur to kindly help us lead chant the Mangalacharan prayers. Sita Mataji, please.
Okay, Prabhuji. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatammirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurum Vaishnavam Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Sri Visagaptamsa He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopi Sa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute तप्त कंचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी प्रसभानुस्तुते देवी परमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धु एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Okay, Mataji. Thank you very much. Very sweetly and nicely chanted.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Prabhu.
Okay, so I would request the devotees to kindly go on mute. Thank you very much. And let us start the class, the discussion by doing the recap of the previous class. So we requested Jeevan Radha Prabhu for doing the recap, but for some reason he was not available for this session. So I thought that let me do the recap. So this was on text number 5. Last class we covered text number 5 in two parts. In first part we understood the various definitions of or various aspects of three type of devotees: Kanishtha, Madhyama, and Uttama. And in the second part of the class of text number 5, we discussed mainly about how to associate carefully with Uttama devotee, or in other words, the advanced devotees. And we covered number of points. Last class was a little bit lengthy, and we covered in detail a lot of things. So I will quickly go through all the bullet points. So the first point that we discussed was Uttama Adhikari is one who is strong both in faith and knowledge. Madhyama Adhikari is strong in faith but little not that strong in knowledge. And the Kanishta Adhikari actually is weak both in faith and knowledge. That's where we started the previous class. About Kanishta Adhikari, we also discussed that how a Kanishta moves towards the Uttama platform. So initially he accepts the process, engages himself or herself very sincerely in the process, and slowly and gradually he starts to appreciate the process because he starts to see the benefit of the process. Some internal purification comes, he feels satisfied, nourished, and that is where he then decide to take up the role of Uttamadhikari, or to himself or herself take the uh, activity of preaching, bringing people into the fold of Krishna consciousness, and that's how he or she progresses towards the Uttamadhikari platform. We also discussed about the vision of the two devotees, Kanishta and Uttama. So Kanishta is something like more of a ritualistic devotee, more from a cultural aspect. He's a devotee. This particular devotee thinks that bhakti is part of life. So I have many things to do in life. One item is also bhakti. I do go to my job, I take care of my family, I also have relatives, I also have friends, I also have social life, I also go to the temple. That is what the Kanishta thinks. Uttamadhikari thinks all the way uh, completely opposite. The Uttamadhikari thinks that my this life actually is part of many lifetimes that I have been living or will continue to live in the future. And bhakti actually is a process which is supposed to uh, go from or which is supposed to uh, cover all the lives. So it the Uttamadhikari thinks that this life actually is part of my bhakti, which I probably started in the previous lives, and it is continuing in this life and will continue to the next life, will continue to the next life. So the Uttamadhikari think that life actually is part of bhakti. Our whole soul business in this life is bhakti. We then elaborately discussed who is an Uttama Adhikari, and we discussed that mainly from four perspectives. One was Bhajan Vigyam Ananyam, another was Anya Nindadi Shunyam. Bhajan Vigyam means expert in doing the bhajan. Uh, then Anya Nindadi Shunya is something like devoid of any criticism of any other person. So doesn't have any critical mentality in his heart, completely devoid of any criticism for others. Then Shushrushaya is something like one should serve such a devotee who is an Uttama platform. And Sangalabdhya means one should really hanker for an association if one gets an opportunity to associate with an Uttamadhikari. On each of these aspects, we elaborately discussed. First of all, Bhajan Vigyam, Ananyam. And we discussed this in a way: knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. So Uttamadhikari knows the way means he understands the scriptures very well and also has the faith that in the process of devotional service, in the process of bhakti, he has a very staunch faith that if I have this bhakti in my life, then I will be successful not only in this life but in my other future lives also. Actually, the ultimate success would be that I will reach to the lotus feet of the Lord. So he's quite convinced and knowledgeable about the way. And then he goes the way. He goes the way means he himself or herself traverse that path which he knows. uh, and while doing so, uh, he also faces obstacles, difficulties, and uh, overcomes those obstacles and so on. So that is, goes the way would mean sets up the example. Shows the way would mean that by his knowledge, by his own example, he guides others also uh, in the process of bhakti, in the process of bhajan. So bhajan vigyam. Vigyam means knowledgeable, and bhajan actually means the process of devotional service. So this is one aspect of it. And then we also discussed, when we discussed about knows the way, that knowing the way, we discussed that it is knowledgeable about scriptures. And we then elaborated on the knows the way is that he is also an expert and creative. So knows the way not necessarily mean giving classes, lectures, and so on, but also he's completely seasoned and knowledgeable about how to attract, how to charm the heart of other people to bring them closer to the lotus feet of the Lord. So we discussed many examples of how Prabhupada was a very expert devotee. He started Rath Yatra, he started Food for Life program, life membership program, like that. And very creatively, very expertly, he attracted people towards the Lord. Also, we discussed upon an Uttamadhikari, how to recognize such a person. We can recognize such a person by his ability to transform or convert many fallen souls to Vaishnavism, to accept. And what is Vaishnavism? Vaishnavism is a science where a person learns how to love God. A science of love of God actually is Vaishnavism. So this Uttamadhikari is known by his ability, how many people he can uh, convince to take up this process of love of God. So when we talk about his ability to convert many souls, we are talking about preaching. So we also took a little detour on what is successful preaching and what is not a very good way of preaching. So successful preaching is something which is driven by inner fulfillment, which is driven by a feeling of compassion, which is driven by this process that I have been the beneficiary of this process. I had this good fortune to come in contact with this process uh, several years ago, and I'm taking the benefit. Let me also now share this process with others so that they also get benefit by this process. So it is driven by inner fulfillment. We also discussed few examples of wrong preaching, like for their own glorification, for the purpose of donation, for making people obey the orders, and so on. So those are the externals or wrong examples of uh, preaching in Krishna consciousness. After Bhajan Vigyam, we discussed about Anya Nindadi Shunya. So Anya Nindadi Shunya means devoid of uh, any criticizing propensity in the heart. But then we contradicted our own statement by saying that Srila Prabhupada, if we read Srila Prabhupada's life, we see that he had been critical to many kind of people. Like he had been critical for general people, for people who were his own disciples, but in a very neophyte stage. Then disciples who were a little bit grown up, how he would handle them, how he would deal with them. Then sometimes there have been criticism or conflicts even within Uttama Adhikaris, maybe several advanced devotees, how to deal with them. So we understood that general people, when a Uttama Adhikari criticizes general people, it is not because of any malintention, because of any malicious intention in the heart. It is mainly to shake them up from their sleep in this material world. That when will you wake up and take up the process of spiritual advancement or devotional service? That is where the Uttamadhikaris may sometimes use very cutting words or many harsh words and so on. So, like Prabhupada has also been critical of scientists, philosophers, and politicians, and so on. So, to a neophyte, if a neophyte doesn't do well in the path of bhakti, sometimes the neophyte falls, sometimes they make mistake. So then the Uttamadhikari is very sensitive about correcting such people. He would correct in private, not in public, so that the confidence of the neophyte actually is not shaken, and he doesn't think himself or herself to be uh, a person who has been ridiculed by someone in front of many people. So he's very sensitive. So to a Madhyamadhikari, he always encourages to use their uh, natural inclination, natural propensity in the service of the Lord. So that's where sometimes he would have to criticize such people. So he would criticize the Madhyama in that way. And advanced devotees, if there is a conflict, then the Uttamadhikari makes sure that such conflicts are not taken in the public. They are privately, in a conducive environment, they are privately discussed, understood, and they are resolved. So that is how we understood the various aspects of Anya Nindadi. Then Shushrushaya. So Shushrushaya is about serving such an Uttamadhikari. So that is mainly for those people who are uh, practicing devotional services. They are not at the platform of Uttamadhikari yet, and maybe they are Kanishthas, maybe they are Madhyamas. So for those people, the instruction is that uh, they should be doing their fundamental service very well, because many of these Uttamadhikaris actually are spiritual masters. They are gurus. So one should take up the service of chanting of the holy names of the Lord, like we have this instruction from Srila Prabhupada to chant at least 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra daily. So we need to do that fundamental service with sincerity. Then also follow the four regulative principles with sincerity, like no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex. Then after that, doing the fundamental service is something like the basic. And then after that, whatever inclinations we have, whatever time, effort we have, we try to apply ourselves and share the other responsibilities of the Uttamadhikari. Primarily, Uttamadhikari responsibility is only to uh, bring people into the towards the lotus feet of the Lord. So that is their whole life. So that is primarily preaching and to explain people, teach people the science of God consciousness. So in that we may have to organize programs, we may have to do book distribution, open temples, and so many activities are there. So according to the inclination, the devotee actually share the responsibility of the Uttamadhikari. That is Sushrusha. Sangalabdhya means, again, for Kanishthas and Madhyamas, what to do with Sangalabdhya means uh, take association of an Uttamadhikari. And that's where we explain to you that one should hanker and one should really uh, make a point that whenever there is an Uttamadhikari, there is an opportunity to associate with an Uttamadhikari. We should take that opportunity and do that association on priority basis, because it can be very precious. Only few moment of association with Uttamadhikari can give you enough ammunition, enough uh, inspiration to continue and nourish yourself lifelong in the process of bhakti. So like that. We also discussed something about few things about what is initiation from a guru. We primarily discussed that the purpose of initiation is transformation. Instead of lover of material things, we transform ourselves to become lover of God. So that is the purpose of initiation. Initiation is a little bit, we start to commit uh, towards a particular spiritual master, become more serious in our commitment, and so on. And how do we engage our seriousness? So what is the eligibility? We are now ready to uh, leave the material enjoyment behind. At least to some extent we should be ready, committed, and we should also be serious about taking up austerities of mind control, sense control, and learning about the absolute truth. So those are the eligibilities for taking up initiation. Finally, we discussed briefly, very briefly, about some other type of devotees which we did not cover in our discussion so far on text number 5. And one category is of Prakrit Sahajiyas. So Prakrit Sahajiyas are, Prakrit means materialistic, Sahajiyas means who takes devotional process very cheaply, very lightly. Yeah. So these are, in nutshell, these are deviant Vaishnav sects who would chant the holy names of the Lord, but they don't want to follow the rules and regulations of the scriptures very seriously. So they will take the activities of devotional service very cheaply. They would display their emotional devotion, devotional emotions in public to gain some advertisement and so on. So, which is something like a little bit of a cheap mentality. So Prabhupada has said that, or Rup Goswami is advising us that one can offer respect in the mind, but one should not take association with some Prakrit Sahajiyas like that. So that was the summary of the previous class. It was a little lengthy class, I would recognize that. But personally, I also feel that association with Uttamadhikari, or the topic of Uttamadhikari, is very important, very significant topic. And if we understand and appreciate the uh, uh, nature of the Uttamadhikari, characteristics of the Uttamadhikari, we will also understand the seriousness of associating with such people, how to deal carefully with such people, be very respectful, be uh, uh, in approach this such people with in the mood of service, because such people are rare. They are not very not available in abundance in the society today. So that is why it was a significant, important topic. Today we will continue our discussion on text number 6, and so far we have discussed at least uh, last four verses, last verse number 2, 3, 4, and 5. So four verses where we are talking actually in some way or the other about association. So text number 2 mentions about association, one of the points is there. Text number 3 also mentions about association as one of the points, as a repetition. But in text number 4 and 5, we have elaborately discussed about only association, on the topic of association. So in text number 5, we have discussed about three type of devotees: Kanishta, Madhyam, and Uttama. Now in text number 6, the topic of association continues, but here we are now trying to understand how not to see a pure devotee from a material vision. So Uttama Adhikari topic is being discussed in text number 6, and why, how we should not see an Uttamadhikari. So here we discussed about that we should do service, we should do, in text number 5, we should associate, we should hanker for such association. But when we do that association with the Uttamadhikari, what precautions we should take while associating with the Uttamadhikari. So that is the point of discussion in text number 6. As you can see here, text number 4, 5, 6 is purely about Sadhu Sangha. And in text number 6, the Sadhu Sangha that we are talking is about how not to, what precautions we should take when doing Sadhu Sangha with a Uttamadhikari. That is the primarily the theme for text number 6. Again, this text that you see now in front of your screen is written in the same meter as it was written, as the text number 5 was written, and that meter is called as Vasanta Tilak. And if you recall, I mentioned to you that Vasanta Tilak Chand is the same Chand in which Brahma Samhita verses have been sung. So it has 14 syllables in each of the periods, and it has a particular meter. So I will try to sing that meter in front of you, and you can make sense how it is sung. So it is sung like this: Drashtai Swabhava Janitair Vapushcha Doshair Na Prakratattvam Iha Bhakta Janasya Pasher Gangam Bhasam Na Khalu Buddhapena Pankair Brahma Dravatvam Apagachati Niradharmai. So like that you can see, uh, in the Sanskrit language there are various meters, and one who has some understanding of these meters, and when we recite the scriptures with these meters, the experience of learning, the experience becomes very, very sweet, very, very deep, emotionally surcharging. So like that, if you also like, you can also recite these verses in the same way. Now trying to understand the meaning of each of these lines, it is a very beautiful verse. A lot of information is there in this verse, and a very nice, a very graphic analogy has been given in this verse. So first two lines is about uh, how one should not uh, visualize Uttama Adhikari, and the next two lines is actually about an analogy, analogy of the Ganges river. So let us look line 1 and line 2 first. So line 1 says Drashtai Swabhava Janitair Vapushcha Doshair. Vapushascha Doshair. Drashtai. Drashtai means ordinary vision. Drashtai Swabhava Janitair. Swabhava means inclination. Uh, They may have some nature, like we have people with nature who have jolly nature, who have maybe serious nature, or maybe somebody may have a little bit more of a pleasant nature, very sweet nature, like that. So we classify different people based upon their nature, and I just now mentioned to you some adjective about the nature. So that is swabhava. So swabhava janitair. Swabhava janitair means that kind of a nature which comes from the swabhava, from the inclination of the devotee. Drashtai swabhava janitair. So some devotee may sound very harsh. Some Uttama Adhikari might be a little bit slow in their movement, maybe a little bit lethargic in their activities, like that. So those are some of the uh, external behaviors we can identify in a particular devotee. Uh, So one classification is Swabhava Janitair, that are born out of their Swabhava. Then Vapushascha Dosher, Drashtai Swabhava Janitair, Vapushascha Dosher. Vapu actually means body. So body could be of black complexion, white complexion. The body might be very uh, beautiful, might be not so beautiful, might be somewhat distorted sometimes. There might be some limb missing from the devotee. Maybe the hand is not there. Maybe some fingers are not there. Maybe there are cuts on the body and so on. So these are probably could be identified as doshair. Doshair means some defects. So drashtai swabhava janitair vapushascha doshair na prakrtatvam na prakrtatvam iha bhakta janasya pashet. So what does this mean? Prakrtatvam means that one does not look towards these kind of defects from a material perspective, materialistic vision. So like you would remember when we discussed the definition of uh, Kanishta Adhikari. So we discussed that this is called as a Prakrata Bhakta. Prakrata Bhakta means looking at devotional activities in a Prakrit way, in a materialistic way. How many rounds do you chant? How many holy places have you visited? So he gauges the devotion of a person based on materialistic aspects. So that is called Prakrit. So here Rupa Goswami is advising us that one should not uh, look towards an Uttama Adhikari, a pure Bhakta, with a Prakrit vision, with a Prakrit Drishti. One should not look. Pashyet means look. Iha Bhakta Janasya. Iha Bhakta Janasya means such kind of pure devotees, one should not look in a with a Prakrit vision, with a materialistic vision. And then the two lines, the balanced two lines, the last two lines are actually about analogy. And what is the analogy? Analogy is Gangam bhasam na khalu budbuda phena pankair. So Gangam bhasam actually means the Ganges water, the water of Ganga river. Huh? So in the monsoon season, when there is a rainy season, many times we can observe that Ganges water become a little bit muddy. Huh? It has some foam, or uh, maybe there are bubbles and so on in the Ganga water in the monsoon season. In monsoon season, so Gangam bhasam na khalu. Khalu, uh, uh, khalu means certainly. Budbuda means bubbles. Like in Hindi, we call bulbula. So in Sanskrit, it is budbuda. Budbuda means bubbles. Phena. Phena means actually foam. So you would remember there is an advertisement for a detergent powder which is known as Fena. So Fena actually, this is coming from the Sanskrit word fain. Fain means foam. And Pankair. Pankair means panka. Pankaj, like Pankaj is the name for lotus. And why this name Pankaja? Because it is grown in Panka. Panka Ja. Ja means to take birth. Ja means Janma, to take birth. And Panka means mud or kichad. Hmm? Uh, so Pankair. So Pankair actually means mud. So there might be in the Ganges water in the monsoon season, there might be some bubbles, there might be some foam, there might be some mud. But despite all that foam, mud, and bubbles, we do not look at Ganges water with a materialistic vision. How do we look Ganges water? We look Ganges water as Brahma Dravatvam. Brahma Dravatvam. Drava. Uh, Drava means its nature. Uh, the way we look at it. Brahma means transcendental. Transcendental means it is spiritual, it is sacred, it is pure. So Brahmadavatvam apagachati niradharmai. Apagachati means is spoiled. The niradharmai. So the characteristic niradharmai means the characteristic of water of Ganga is spiritual in nature. And just because in the monsoon season there are some bubbles, there are some mud, there are some foam, the spiritual nature of that water doesn't get spoiled, doesn't get apagachati, it doesn't get polluted. So that is what the meaning of this word is. So although the devotee, a pure devotee, may have some bodily defects, maybe have some defects because of his swabhava, but we should not look such a devotee with a materialistic vision. Similarly, as we do not see Ganges water as spoiled with foam, with mud, with dirt, but we still understand that Ganges water is Brahma Dravatvam. It is all transcendental because it is coming from the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. So that is how this verse has been composed by Srila Rupa Goswami. So there are some word meanings. Vapusha, of the body. Prakratatvam, the state of being material. Gangam Bhasam, of the Ganges water. Budbuda Phena Pankair, bubbles, foam, and mud. And Brahma Dravatvam, the transcendental nature. So these are some of the word meanings. You can uh, read them couple of times so that you will better appreciate the verse in the Sanskrit when you will read it. Okay, Srila Prabhupada has given the translation of this verse, and while giving the translation of this verse, Srila Prabhupada actually have added some purport from his own side. He has added some purport uh, to the translation. So it is not like a word-to-word translation in that way, uh, but there is some purport added in the translation. I will read it. Being situated in his original Krishna conscious position, a pure devotee does not identify with the body. Such a devotee should not be seen from a materialistic point of view. Indeed, one should overlook a devotee's having a body born in a low family, a body with a bad complexion, a deformed body, or a diseased or infirm body. According to ordinary vision, such imperfections may seem prominent in the body of a pure devotee. But despite such seeming defects, the body of pure devotee cannot be polluted. It is exactly like the waters of the Ganges, which sometimes during the rainy season are full of bubbles, foam, and mud. The Ganges water do not become polluted. Those who are advanced in spiritual understanding will bathe in the Ganges without considering the condition of the water. Now, some of you might think that these days, many times we see that uh, the industries are throwing away their toxic waste in the Ganges water and so on. And what to do in case we come across such a Ganges water, which is actually not only polluted or polluted with mud, foam, or any dirt, but actually it is polluted with maybe some poison or maybe with some toxic waste. So in that case, we don't have to sip the water, we don't have to take maybe bath in the water, but we can meditate upon the Ganges water and offer our respects maybe within the mind. And if it is not really very polluted, maybe we can take some droplets and maybe put on our head. Like that, maybe we can offer to the uh, Ganges water. So we have to balance between the transcendental as well as in the material. We need not completely reject the material or completely accept the material in the sense that it can harm our physical body, but we should appreciate the transcendental nature also, paying some proper respects. So like that, uh, we can deal with some situations like that when it comes to taking bath in the holy rivers. So this particular text has three themes in particular, and one theme is pure consciousness. So what is pure consciousness? why we are talking, what is the difference between material consciousness and pure consciousness. Then uh, perceiving a pure devotee. And this is the main theme of the class today. How do we perceive a pure devotee? And it has got elaborate discussion. And we have taken number of stories from Srila Prabhupada's life and maybe some other stories also to explain you in detail about how do we perceive a pure devotee. Uh, so here in this particular verse, the theme is primarily about material vision. So what could be the possible examples of material vision towards a pure devotee? So we already looked at some of the examples in our translation, but we will look at some more examples, and we will take some stories from Prabhupada's life and maybe life from other saints to elaborately discuss how a material vision towards a pure devotee actually can mean. Understanding a devotee's glory, and then we will conclude with one slide to understand what is a devotee's glory and why, on what aspect of a devotee we should focus more, and how we should actually keep in the background the material aspect of the of a pure devotee, rather not to dwell a lot on the material imperfections of the pure devotee, but we should focus more on the uh, transcendental loving service, the mood of transcendental loving service that devotee has developed towards the Lord. That is where we need to focus more. So we will look at that part in the end. But to introduce the chapter, we will try to explain you about pure consciousness and what is its relevance in the devotional life, and what is the relevance in with respect to this particular chapter. So consciousness can be classified either as material or spiritual. Those people who are more materialistic in nature, those who are not really inclined towards loving and serving God, they typically are, we can say, in the material consciousness. Their whole life is rotating around their families, their jobs, and so on. They generally don't believe in afterlife. They generally don't believe in God, and so on. So that is something materialistic conscious people. Then the second type is spiritual conscious, spiritual consciousness, and these are the people who are mainly inclined towards loving and serving God. And we understand from our bhakti uh, perspective that we have gained from Srimad Bhagavad Gita that the best definition of God is Lord Krishna. So spiritual consciousness means how to love and serve Lord Krishna. So these are the two differences between uh, the material and the spiritual consciousness. Now, when we say a pure devotee, what does it mean? So, pure devotee actually is completely devoid of any material consciousness. Huh? So, the definition of pure devotee Srila Prabhupada is giving as is unalloyed devotee. Unalloyed. What do you mean by alloy? Like we have this alloy called stainless steel. So, stainless steel is iron Fe, ferrum that we call in chemistry. So iron, when it is mixed with some alloys like nickel, chromium, and so on, the properties of the metal changes. Although when we mix these impurities in the metal, it actually becomes for it is actually improves. But here the word unalloyed actually is meant in the terms of pure. Pure means there are no external impurities. And what are those external impurities? Those external impurities could be selfish desires. And what could be the selfish desires? Selfish desires could be in the form of fruitive activities, in the form of impersonal liberation, and so on. Yeah. So uh, that is what the definition of unalloyed devotees. Unalloyed devotee can transcend beyond material consciousness. So, like in the previous slide, we discussed about material and spiritual. And when we are defining unalloyed devotee, we are trying to explain that it doesn't have, the devotee doesn't have any material consciousness. And there are two quotes from scripture Srila Prabhupada has given in the purport. One is from Bhagavad Gita chapter 14 verse number 26, and another one is from the Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. So verse number 26 we have already read in Bhagavad Gita. I will quickly come to that verse and explain it to you. What does it mean? This verse says, Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sa gunan samati tyaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So what this verse is saying? One mam chayo avyabhicharena. Avyabhicharena. Avyabhicharena means without any deviation, without fail, fully dedicated. Uh, One who engages in unfailing, full devotional service in all circumstances. Bhakti yogena sevate. Full devotional service in all circumstances. Unfailing in all circumstances. Whether you are happy, whether you are distressed, whether you are diseased, whether you are healthy, in all circumstances, one who engages unfailingly in the devotional service of the Lord, then what happens? He at once transcends sa gunan samti tyaitan, at once transcends the modes of material nature. And then what happens? Brahma bhuyaya kalpate, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So the point is, one who is engaged always in the service of the Lord, he cannot be selfish. He cannot be lethargic. So when he is not selfish, he is not lethargic. So lethargy is the characteristic of tamoguna. Selfishness is the characteristic of rajoguna, because he is not doing it for himself or herself. He is doing it for the Lord. So he is not selfish, and because he is actively engaged in service, he is not in tamoguna. He is not kind of uh, lazy or lethargic. And then, because he always understands that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord, and he always feels grateful that Supreme Lord has given me so much resources, so much blessings in my life, and all those blessings, since it has come from the Supreme Lord, I have to return back to the Supreme Lord. He also transcends mode of goodness. So what is the problem with mode of goodness? Problem with mode of goodness is the feeling of superiority. Feeling of superiority means that we are actually doing all this. I am actually better than the others. That is the problem in mode of goodness. But the devotee also transcends mode of goodness. And how he transcends mode of goodness? By always having this feeling of gratitude in his heart, that this is all, my success is all because of my beloved Lord. That is how the devotee also transcends the mode of material nature. So the point is that a pure devotee is beyond the modes, beyond satoguna, beyond rajoguna, and beyond tamoguna. That's what it is said. Sa gunan samtityaitan. What once transcends the mode of material nature. One who engages full devotional service in all circumstances. And then what is the position of such a person? That person is actually Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate, that has come to the level of Brahman. Now he is no longer in the control of the modes. He is now at a spiritual platform. So, dear devotees, here Srila Prabhupada is setting up the scene by first of all explaining to us what a pure devotee's inner consciousness is like. His inner consciousness is beyond the modes. He's always beyond the modes, and that is why he's Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. He's at the level of Brahman. Then Prabhupada also mentions this definition of pure devotional service from Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, the book that we are going to study after we finish Nectar of Instruction. And Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu gives a definition of pure devotional service, unalloyed devotional service, Uttama Bhakti or pure Bhakti. The definition has been given in Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, and that is Anya Abhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavratam. Anavratam means uncovered. It is not covered with jnana, it is not covered with karma. What is not covered with jnana and karma? Pure devotional service. Shilanam bhaktir uttama. So uttama bhakti is not covered with jnana, it is not covered with karma. Karma means fruitive activity. If I do this, I get this in return. That is fruitive activity. Jnana means impersonal liberation. If I do this, if I meditate on the impersonal Brahman, I will get mukti, I will get moksha. So desire for mukti, desire for moksha is also a desire, is also a desire, personal desire or selfish desire. So anya abhilashita shunyam, with no ulterior motive or with no ulterior desire, either be it jnana or karma, it is completely unavoided, it is completely devoid or uncovered with these kind of feelings. But it is anukulyanna krishnanu shilanam, anukulyena, favorable to serving Lord Krishna, and this is known as bhaktir uttama. So this is the mentality of a uttama bhakta, is always engaged in the favorable way in the service of Lord Krishna. Anukulyena Krishnanu Anushilanam. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. So there are three words. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. Anushilanam means following in the footsteps, following in the guidelines of Lord Krishna. So that is what the mindset of the pure devotee. So such a devotee, a pure devotee, uh, one should not have a materialistic vision. With such a devotee which who has nothing else in his heart, in his heart it is only pure devotional service favorably done towards the Lord according to the Lord's instructions. Hmm. For such a pure devotee, one should not have a offensive perception, one should not deal with such a devotee in an offensive way. So offensive perceptions and offensive dealings with pure devotee, we should not do it like that. And what are the possible examples for offensive perception and offensive dealings with pure devotee? One is at the level of bodily defects. So we will elaborately discuss on this. Low birth, like somebody is born in a family of maybe low caste people, or maybe Vaishya or a Shudra, like that. Yeah. Then accidental mistakes. Sometimes devotees might make some mistakes, uh, and we will understand what possibly could those mistakes be, what is the nature of those mistakes, and try to see that how do we observe or how do we deal with such situations with a pure devotee. Sometimes people feel envy, sometimes people feel jealous when such pure devotee actually are very exalted, they get a lot of appreciation from the public, they are glorified in the public. Sometimes people feel envious. So this is also an offensive uh, way to look at the pure devotee who has nothing else in his heart other than the service of the Lord. Then sometimes these pure devotees are given some disciplinary punishment by some people, and that could be very very detrimental towards the devotional life or spiritual life of such people. And criticizing uh, a pure devotee, and then advising or correcting a pure devotee. So a devotee is at the platform, a pure devotee is the platform of a spiritual master, he's at the platform of our guru. So we should not advise or we should not correct uh, in to such a pure devotee. So these are several offensive perceptions or offensive dealings with a pure devotee. These are some of the examples, and we will one by one try to explain you what are the various stories and various ways to give you a little more detailed understanding of each of these aspects. Bodily defects. First of all, we will cover this topic. So whenever a person who is a little bit learned in some spiritual understanding of Vedic literature, so he or she would know the concept of karma. So karma concept is that whatever we have done in our previous lives, we have to pay back in our this life. If we have done a bad karma, we have to make a uh, we have to sacrifice something from our side. If we have done some good karma, we actually get some benefit in this life because of that good karma in this life or maybe in next life. Similarly, when we see a bodily defect in a pure devotee, we might think or we might have this thought, maybe this bodily defect in this particular devotee, a pure devotee, is actually because of the bad karma the devotee might have done in the past. And Such a vision actually we may have not only for a pure devotee, but in general, when we have a little bit understanding of the principle of karma, we might have this vision with general people also. But this is not something, a right way to look at people. uh, and I will explain you with some example. But first of all, we should understand that the karma principle that we understand and learn from the Vedic scriptures, it is mainly to set accountability. Mainly to set accountability means that if we don't follow a proper dharma, our proper duty, we are actually going to get bound by karma. We are actually going to get some karmic reaction in our next life, in our time to come. So what does it supposed to do? It is supposed to make us feel accountable for our actions. And when we feel accountable for our actions, we actually don't want to go in that direction which are taking us towards bad action or lethargy or not performing our duty. So karma principle, the main purpose is to set accountability. It is not about to make us think to run away from our accountability. And I will explain you from some of the examples. I have given some examples here. Now, when a mother is uh, taking care of her children, a baby, a small baby, and the baby starts crying, so the mother doesn't think like that the baby is crying, it is actually because of the baby's past karma. Let the baby cry, because let him suffer the karma he has done or she has done in the past. Let the baby cry. The mother doesn't think like this. The mother thinks now the baby is crying, maybe the baby needs some attention of mine. So the mother thinks of her dharma of providing care to the baby when the baby is crying. The mother doesn't think of the baby is crying because of the past karma. This is one example. Another example is, if a person gets robbed by a thief, uh, a thief broke into the house of a person, stole away all the possessions or some of the possessions, and the person goes to the court, goes to the king, or goes to the judicial system of the country, of the land, whatever, and make a request to the judge, kindly give me justice, or make a request to the police, kindly catch the thief. But the justice or the police doesn't say that you got robbed because of your karma. The police is expected to perform the duty, or the judge is expected to provide justice, judgment, and make some necessary uh, orders to recover the lost property or whatever theft has been taken place to this person. So the point is, the judge and the police is expected to do their dharma rather than contemplating on that you got robbed because of your karma. Similarly, a rape victim, we don't think when we hear these news in the news channels that a lady or a girl got actually brutally raped uh, by some obnoxious people. So we don't think that it was mainly because of the girl's past karma. The girl got victimized for a rape incident. Uh, we are expected to do our dharma, to provide justice to the girl, to make sure that all those culprits who are involved are brought to the right punishment. So the point I'm trying to make is, the principle of karma is not to make us run away from our accountability in the name of past reaction coming because of the bad karma by some individual, but rather it inspires our accountability so that we don't run away from our accountability and get caught up in the bad karma. So that is the principle of karma. Now, why I'm mentioning that to you is, in the context of text number 6, is that when we see a bodily defect in a particular devotee, uh, a bodily defect could be a disease, it could be old age, it could be ugly looks, or it could be maybe some infirmity in the body. So we should not consider that particular aspect in a pure devotee to be as a karmic reaction of their past life. Now, it is because of the karmic reaction in the past life, or maybe this life or whatever, but we don't have to dwell on that particular aspect. Our business is mainly to focus on the devotional progress such a person has made now, and focus on that devotional aspect, devotional potency of such a person, rather than focusing on their shortcomings in their body, which could possibly because of coming from their past karma. So that is the point. And in order to explain that point, there's a verse from Bhagavad Gita. I think this is the 30th verse, not 32nd verse, 9.30, uh, which says, अपि चेत सुदुराचारो भजते माम अनन्य भाग साधुरेव स मंतव्य सम्यक व्यवसितो हि सा. So this verse we have studied in our classes on Bhagavad Gita. So what is saying is that even if one has committed most abominable action, suduracharo. So durachar means abominable and sudurachar means most abominable action. If he is engaged in devotional service, bhajate mam ananya bhak, sadhur eva samantavya, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. Now, a person might have done some abominable act in the past, and because of that abominable action, the person have got a deformed body or a diseased body or whatever. But now that person has changed. That person is now doing bhajate mam ananya bhak. The person has done course correction in the life. So we should not dwell upon what the person has done in the past. Rather, we focus on what progress he has made now and how I can benefit myself from meditating upon the progress that such a person has made. So that is what we can understand from Bhagavad Gita, verse number 30, chapter number 9. So that is about the bodily defect, as I was mentioning to you. So we have, like you can see here in this slide, we have covered many of those aspects. So bodily defect I have covered. Like that, I will take one by one each of one of those: low birth, accidental mistake, and so on. So now we will go on birth. How do we understand the concept of birth? Birth is something. Now the examples of birth could be birth in the family of a Shudra, birth in the family of a Chandala, or birth in the family of a Vaishya, and so on. So, or uh, maybe sometimes the people who are uh, in the Eastern philosophies, they would consider people who have taken birth in the Western world, they are actually not so pure in their behavior, in their activities. So they consider people from the West also low birth. And why I'm bringing the concept of people from the West is because Srila Prabhupada started ISKCON movement in the Western world, in United States, where there were he made a lot of people from the Western world devotees. So, but when Srila Prabhupada brought those Western devotees to India, many people in the Indian subcontinent actually looked upon such people as, say, why are they doing devotional service? They are actually low born. They are not so expected, or they are not eligible or qualified to do such an activity. Like I'm giving here example of Srila Prabhupada's Western disciples. So when Srila Prabhupada made these Western disciples in the United States, he brought these Western disciples to India just to make them visit many holy places, Haridwar, Vrindavan, and many of those places. There were reactions from the Indian people in two ways. So some people thought, uh, oh, these people have become Western people, have become devotees. They have accepted our culture. See, our culture is so great. See, our culture is so great. So that is again a kind of uh, boosting our own ego, that our culture is so great that they have accepted that culture. Rather than appreciating the devotees, they think that our culture is great. Then the second reaction was, see, these people are actually not pure. These people are born in the Western countries. They are low born people. uh, They cannot take to this pure culture of Krishna Bhakti. Krishna Bhakti is very pure. So they are actually not qualified or eligible to take this kind of a process. So this is uh, perceiving devotees or perceiving sometimes pure devotees. Maybe if a pure devotee is coming from an American background or from an Australian background or from an African background. Now, the American might be having a white body and African might be having a black body or whatever. So we should not look upon these people uh, if they are pure devotees. We should not actually or judge them from their bodily complexions or bodily makeup or bodily uh, beauty or whatever. So that is what I'm trying to impress upon here, because devotion is not decided by birth. Devotion is decided by one's surrender to Krishna. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karma anavratam. Anukulyena Krishna anushilanam bhaktiruttama. So only how sincerely, how dedicatedly one is following the process of Krishna Bhakti, that has to be the criteria, or how much spiritual advancement a person has made in the process of Krishna Bhakti. That is the criteria to judge whether a person is devotionally advanced or whether a person is not devotionally advanced. So there are some other examples also, examples of caste Goswamis. Now, if you go to Vrindavan, in some of these temples are actually have been kind of become a monopoly of certain caste Goswamis. Caste Goswamis, when I use the word caste Goswami, means that they were born maybe in the family of some great devotee, and just because they were born or one of their forefathers was a great devotee, they think that they have the monopoly to teach Krishna Bhakti, to give people initiation, to make people devotees, and so on. So that is something which is a wrong conception. If a person has taken a birth in a family of a great Vaishnava or in a family of a great devotee, maybe in some of their forefathers, but they themselves, if they are not following properly the process of devotional service, then such people cannot call themselves as Goswamis. Goswami word means, go means senses, Swami means master. A person who has mastered and have a uh, very good control over the senses and the mind, such a person is actually known as a Goswami. So Srila Prabhupada would say that teaching Krishna consciousness is not the monopoly of caste Goswamis. Rather, Krishna consciousness, rather, Goswami is the title, the title Goswami actually is the monopoly of a pure devotee. So that's how Srila Prabhupada has mentioned that if a person is a pure devotee, then the title of Goswami can actually be uh, given to such a devotee. So this is an example of uh, when we look at the pure devotee based on upon their birth, uh, that is not the right way to look at the pure devotee. We should look at the pure devotee on how much advancement he has or she has made in their life in the process of Krishna Bhakti, and how dedicated and how really surrendered such a devotee is towards Lord Krishna. That should be our main criteria. So that is the second part, birth. So first part was bodily defect, second part is birth. Then the third one is accidental mistakes. Accidental mistakes, I will explain you with the help of a story. So Srila Prabhupada had one of his sannyas disciples. His name is Jayadvait Maharaj, Jayadvait Swami. So Maharaj is still with us, is still on this planet, and gives a lot of very nice classes. Sometimes, if you get time, you can Google Jayadvait Swami and hear his class. He's a wonderful writer and an author, and has taught writing skills to many devotees in our movement. He's also an editor of English Back to Godhead magazine and so on. One of his books recently won an award also of a best book, I don't remember the name of the award, but is a very accomplished person in terms in the field of writing books and so on. So Jayadvait Maharaj, uh, when he was with Prabhupada one day in a morning walk, Prabhupada would sometimes would go with his disciples on a morning walk, and then they will have intimate discussions about nature, and Prabhupada would be in a very relaxed mood at that time, and he would share his learnings with his disciples. So on one such occasion, Jayadvait Maharaj was with Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk, and he asked one question. He asked Prabhupada this question, that sometimes a pure devotee commit mistakes. Hmm? So how should we look at it? And then some disciples were there. They were actually quite kind of became a little bit concerned that how can Jayadvait Maharaj can ask such a difficult question. And then Jayadvait Maharaj, no, it is possible that a pure devotee can also commit mistake. For example, a pure devotee while teaching Krishna consciousness might quote a wrong verse. Maybe there was some word that has to be used, but the devotee out of mistake used a little different word. So like sometimes Prabhupada would you quote Sanskrit verses from Bhagavad Gita, and instead of saying neti mameti so Arjuna, he would say neti mameti so Pandava. So instead of Arjuna, he would say Pandava. But actual verse it is Arjuna, but in the class he made this mention of Pandava. So so Srila Prabhupada replied to Jayadvait Maharaj that a vision only based upon uh, such incorrection or such if a verse has been quoted wrongly and so on, that is an incorrect vision to look at the pure devotee. And he clarified that a pure devotee should be looked upon by the intention he has in his heart. If a devotee has this intention of always serving the Lord, he has this intention to uh, uh, always do something about Lord Krishna, that intention actually uh, is to be looked upon and is to be focused upon, and should be the criteria whether pure devotee is making a mistake or whether pure devotee is not making a mistake. If our intention is always to love and serve Krishna, then we are not making mistake, although externally it might appear that we might have done a mistake from a material perspective. So from a material perspective, maybe yes, it was a mistake, a verse was quoted wrongly, or there was some grammatical mistake in the writing, or a text, or a phrase, but that is not to be considered as a mistake. So so I have used this accidental mistake part by with the help of two examples. So one example is quoting a wrong verse, as I just explained you. And incorrect vision of perfection is based on externals, but the correct vision of perfection is based on intention to serve Krishna. Then a second example. Second example is, you would hear if you go and read some of the books that are there in ISKCON movement about Srila Prabhupada and so on. Many times there have been some controversy, like if somebody made some editing, and as I was mentioning to you, Jayadvait Maharaj is an excellent author, he's an excellent editor. And in editing, what do you have to do? Editing business is all about finding mistakes, proofreading, correcting things, making things better, and so on. So Srila Prabhupada's English was not perfect. Sometimes grammatically things could be possibly said and done in a better way. And when at times Jayadvait Maharaj, who was an editor of his Bhagavad Gita that he has written, after Prabhupada had left the planet, Jayadvait Maharaj actually made some editing on the Bhagavad Gita, and he was criticized for that. He was criticized that how can you edit the work of a pure devotee? Whatever pure devotee has said actually is full and final. How can you really edit such work? Huh? How can you find some defect in the work of a pure devotee? Now, here we need to understand that we need to uh, appreciate this fact that this editing was not done on the content of the or 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 the message of the Bhagavad Gita that Srila Prabhupada had tried to convey. The content was uh, mainly on those aspects which are something like how to present thing, how to make it grammatically more correct, and so on. So the editing was mainly from those aspects. Now, if we don't do that kind of an editing, if Jayadvait Maharaj would not do that kind of an editing, and that book goes to some person who is reading that book, or a new person who has just now came in contact with Krishna consciousness movement, if such a person is reading that book and find a lot of mistakes in that book, editing mistakes, then the impression that such a person will make with such a book is that this book doesn't seem to be written by an intelligent person. There are a lot of mistakes, and he might turn away from reading that book in completeness, and there might be a lost opportunity that a person who came so close towards God, he actually could not come closer to the God just because there were some English mistakes. So we should understand that editing and all those kind of activities on the work of a pure devotee is to be done to present things nicely, not to modify the message of the pure devotee. So such an accidental mistake, if is there in the work, in the kind of dealings with the pure devotee, then one should overlook such mistakes. One should actually focus on the spiritual potency of such a pure devotee. Okay, so envying the exalted position. Now, this will take a little bit of maybe 5 6 minutes because I have to give you some background behind this topic. Now, envying the exalted position, this is mainly about when Srila Prabhupada went to United States, and he was very successful in attracting a lot of Westerners in the process, in the science of Krishna consciousness. And when he brought these disciples uh, uh, of his to India, so many of Srila Prabhupada's God brothers means people who have been initiated by your own spiritual master. So they are known as God brothers. So a spiritual master is known as something like our spiritual father, and such a spiritual father has many disciples. So one disciple and another disciple, they are actually like God brothers. In the God family, we are like brothers and sisters. So uh, when Prabhupada's disciples came to India, many of the God brothers were feeling very envious towards Srila Prabhupada. But many of those were actually also appreciating his contribution, appreciating very lavishly, offering praises and appreciation to Prabhupada in public. But there were also some of these God brothers who were kind of jealous with Srila Prabhupada, kind of envious with Srila Prabhupada, and so on. So, uh, such a behavior we should not actually uh, show towards a pure devotee. Yeah? So, for example, when Srila Prabhupada came back to Vrindavan with his Western disciples, so in Vrindavan it was a big topic. So, how Bhaktivedanta Swami went from Vrindavan, because he was in Vrindavan before going to USA. So how Bhaktivedanta Swami from the Radha Damodar temple, he wrote few books, went to USA, and from there he brought so many Western disciples, a busload of Western disciples back to Vrindavan. And uh, uh, then they organized a program to honor and appreciate Srila Prabhupada. So in that program, one of his god brothers came, and he gave that speech that Bhaktivedanta Swami in his previous in his life, he was previously a businessman. So as a businessman, he had to deal with a lot of people. So he had organization skills and so on. And now he has actually gone to West, and with such low bond people, he has made some success. He has got some devotees. So it is okay anyway. We appreciate it and so on. So like that, this particular god brother, although it might appear that he was appreciating, but actually he was minimizing. In what sense? He was trying to say that we are actually sannyasis, we are preaching to a very high class people. And Bhaktivedanta Swami actually went to the West because of his Vaishya background, because of his business background. He could deal with a lot of different type of people and actually could make some into devotees. So this is actually minimizing. This is actually coming out of the feeling of envy. Yeah. So history of Gaudiya Mutt is there where uh, in the past Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was who was the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, he had a lot of success in his lifetime. He had made 64 mathas. Two of those were in outside India also. One was in Rangoon, one was in Montreal, Canada. But after the departure of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, uh, he did not appoint a successor, one person as a successor. Rather, he advised his disciples to organize their preaching in a form of a committee. Committee means there would be 10 people in a committee, and in as a committee they would come together, they would debate upon a topic, and then the decisions will be taken, and that's how the movement will progress further. But the disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati could not digest this particular arrangement. They were not used to these kind of arrangement in that time. So uh, they tried to operate like that in some for some period, but they could not actually fully appreciate and continue like that. Finally, they appointed one person among themselves in the as a leader of the community, but that person could not hold all the other people together, and he himself had some problems in the spiritual life, and that's where the whole Gaudiya Mutt Sampradaya, which was created by Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, broke into two factions, and there broke a internal uh, war among these two factions on who will acquire which property of Gaudiya Mutt. That disturbed a lot of very sincere disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, and they decided to stay away from that uh, quarrel. And they opened up their own individual mathas, and they started their own preaching in whatever humble way they could have done it. But the point is that they were very sincere disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Bhakti, our Srila Prabhupada, Abhay Charan Prabhu, Abhay Charanarvind Prabhu. He was only a peripheral devotee. He was simply a grahastha, a businessman, had no uh, prominent position in the matha. But when such a person actually went out in the United States and had such a big success, and when he came back to India with a lot of Western disciples, many of the God brothers could not digest that success. See, we are so exalted, we are actually sannyasis, we are full time into this business, but such a peripheral devotee, not even a sannyasi, only a grahastha and a businessman from the past, went out and had so much success. So there were a group of God brothers who had a lot of envy for Srila Prabhupada. So the point is, we should not have this kind of an envious view or a jealous view towards a pure devotee. That is the crux of this story. Let me see how many slides I still have. I think I have only 2 or 3 slides. So please bear with me for maybe another 5 minutes. So criticism and disciplinary action is the another topic. Criticism and disciplinary action. Uh, this is mainly because of disciplinary action means when we or when a group of people identify a pure devotee, uh, just because the pure devotee has born in a low caste family or had a low birth in their life, they don't see the spiritual potency of such a devotee, and they try to persecute such a devotee, try to take a disciplinary action against such a devotee. Maybe it could be a punishment, it could be a death sentence, it could be many things like that. So such criticism and disciplinary action mainly because such a devotee has taken a low birth and so on. That is something also looking at such a devotee in a materialistic vision, with a materialistic vision. And we find a lot of examples of such persecution, such disciplinary action in the medieval period. When the bhakti movement was there, there were a lot of pure devotees, Vaishnava saints that were coming up, and many had to face such disciplinary action from so-called pseudo spiritualists who were actually in power, who were controlling the domain of religion, domain of spirituality in the mainstream society. They had connections with kings, they had connections with political leaders, and just because the pure devotees who were born in a low family, uh, because of their mass appeal, they could connect with the people very quickly, very efficiently, very nicely, and turn them into devotees themselves. These people who were pseudo spiritualists, they were in power, they felt such people, such devotees, pure devotees, as a threat to their empire. And out of jealousy, out of criticism, out of seeing them as a threat to their own empire, they persecuted against them. They kind of led uh, a project against them, and they actually complained to the kings, to the political leaders, and they were actually brought to such disciplinary action. And some of these stories are, one of the stories from Haridas Thakur. So Haridas Thakur is a Vaishnava Acharya who has born in the Vaishnava tradition, who was born as a Muslim, but because of his sincerity, because of his liking towards the holy name, he's actually was chanting holy name throughout the day. Actually, in the Vaishnava circles, he's known as Nam Acharya. Nam Acharya means person who is actually the topmost chanter of the holy names. So that is Nam Acharya position. So Haridas Thakur also became very popular at that time in his period. And some of the Hindus complained against Haridas Thakur to the Muslim king. And Haridas Thakur explained to the Muslim king that how does it matter if I was born in a Muslim family? How does it matter I am reading Quran or Puran? The Quran and the Puran is actually talking about the same Paramatma. And the Paramatma can inspire different people in different ways. So the Muslim king was very much impressed by the speech of Haridas Thakur. But the assistants of this king were hardliners, and they sentenced Haridas Thakur to be flogged, to be whipped in the marketplace unless and until Haridas Thakur is died, is dead. So Haridas Thakur was persecuted like that in the marketplace. But that is another story. It's a long story that how Haridas Thakur could not uh, be made dead. He actually was thrown into the Ganges river. Then people recovered his body, and once again Haridas Thakur came back to the king, and that's where these people realized that he's a not an ordinary person. He's actually a some mystical, some really spiritually potent person. And then he left Haridas Thakur like that. Similarly, we have story of Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ was born as a Jew, and in the Jew tradition, he thought that there were a lot of rituals going on, and he thought that these rituals are not doing much, and he was started preaching to those people to come close to God, to get the essence out of it, and rather move away from these rituals. And this thing was not liked by some of the Jews at those times. And when it was not liked by those Jews, they complained against Jesus Christ to the Roman king, and then Roman king sentenced him to be crucified. So you would find such stories not only in Vaishnava tradition or maybe in Christian tradition. You will find such stories everywhere. huh? So like that, Srila Prabhupada was also criticized by his god brothers when he returned back to India. So the point here is we should not criticize such pure devotees and not at all engage in the activities of disciplinary action against such pure devotees. Maybe this second last slide, advice or correction. So sometimes people, because of their ignorance, may want to come to the pure devotee and try to give them some advice. Sir, you should not do like this. Sir, you should behave like this was not proper when you mentioned that thing in the class. I don't think, I disagree with you, like that. So advice or correction, we should not do it with the pure devotees. It is actually an offense. So advanced Vaishnavas or advanced devotees are not subject to advice of a neophyte Vaishnava. So advanced Vaishnavas are at the platform of a guru or a platform of a teacher of a neophyte Vaishnava. And a student should not unknowingly or should not unnecessarily correct and advise such a pure devotee. So that is another materialistic view or vision towards the pure devotee. So that is uh, a picture you can see here about Haridas Thakur brought in the front of the king, who is giving some justice or judgment to Haridas Thakur, and then Haridas Thakur being flogged into the marketplace and so on. So like that we can see this picture. So finally, this is the last slide of the class today. Understanding a devotee's glory. So I will read this, it is self explanatory. Pure devotee is not a conditioned soul. Pure devotee do not fall into bad association. We cannot, even if the pure devotee comes to the bad association, the association will get purified because of the presence of the pure devotee. But the pure devotee will not get affected because of the bad association. So it is like that. We might get affected by the bad association, but the pure devotee cannot. Pure devotee do not commit offenses to the holy name because he does not have any uh, other desires, annabhilashita shunyam. So he cannot commit offense to the holy name. Unless one is a devotee, one cannot see another devotee perfectly. So in order to differentiate between uttama adhikari and the kanishta adhikari or general people, one should be at least at the level of madhyama adhikari, so that they can differentiate between who is a pure devotee and who is maybe a neophyte devotee or who is not a devotee. Distinguish between an advanced and neophyte Vaishnava by their activities. So we can differentiate between the various Vaishnavas by understanding what activity they are doing. The seriousness of activities, by analyzing their activities, we can understand how much they are committed or dedicated towards Krishna. So we can distinguish based on the activities they are doing. If we consider ourselves a devotee but start to engage in material misconduct, it will ruin the growth of our bhakti. So the caution given in this purport, in this verse by Srila Prabhupada, is that if we are considering ourselves as devotee, as a Vaishnava, engaged in some process of bhakti, but at the same time we are also engaging ourselves in material misconduct, then we should remember that such an activity will ruin the growth of our bhakti. So one of the material misconduct would be to look at the pure devotee with a material vision. Like Ganga water, although it is spoiled with some dirt, with some foam, with some bubbles, we still appreciate the spiritual potency of the water. And similarly, even if there are some bodily defects, some uh, swabhava janit defect are there in a pure devotee, we should ignore them, we should overlook them. Rather, we should focus on the spiritual potency of such a devotee for our own spiritual advancement. So, with that, I would conclude this class. All glories to Sri Updeshamrit, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Rup Goswami. So now we can open the floor for discussion. Thank you very much. Questions and takeaways, we can do it now. Thanks. Thank you very much for your patience. We got a little bit overrun by 5-10 minutes, but I hope uh, you found it useful. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, Ishwar Prabhu. Yeah.
It was an excellent evening. You talked with a lot of conviction and clarity, and I very humbly salute your devotion, and we are really enlightened on many
My pleasure,
fronts.
Prabhuji. I take this as a blessing from a Vaishnava. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your.
It's
Yeah.
my pleasure too. But I want to ask something which we have repeated number of times, just to get a reassurance on a thing.
Mhm.
There are three words:
Mhm.
a pure devotee,
Mhm.
and then an akarta, and a Goswami. Are the three things same, or there's some fine distinction between the two?
Same,
Because
same.
sometime while explaining akarta, I'm not able to sort of really clear the cobweb, what I really mean by an akarta. So can you
Akarta,
please?
akarta means, I will explain you. Akarta means, see, karta means I have done it.
Yes.
Karta, the mood of karta means I have done it. And when we say I have done it, actually it is ahankar.
Yes.
So how do we know ahankar? Aham means, in Sanskrit, aham means I, and kar means ness. So
Yes.
I-ness. I am the cause of the success that I am enjoying. I am the
Okay.
only cause of success I am enjoying. This is
Okay.
ahankar. This is ahankar. Now we
Right.
cannot say, even from material perspective, that we are the cause of our success. I will give you an example. Say we got birth when our mother and when our parents came together, we got birth, right? So we got birth because of somebody else,
Right.
because of our parents. Our parents took care of us, fed us in the childhood, protected us, sent us to the school, paid our fees, engaged with some good tuition teachers, and our education was done by our parents.
Right.
Uh, our our education also involved a lot of teachers who
Quite right.
actually educated us, and then so on and so forth. We can identify so many other events, that whatever we are right now, even from material perspective, is because of so many other people.
Right.
So how can we say that our success is only because of us? We
True.
cannot say. So this I-ness is the cause of ahankar, where the person thinks that I am the karta, I am the doer.
Yes.
Huh? But who is akarta? Akarta is that person who identifies others also,
Okay.
and primarily who also identifies the Supreme Lord.
Yes.
It is only
True.
because of the Supreme Lord I got my parents. It is
Yes.
only because of the Supreme Lord's arrangement I could actually got good education. It is only because of the mercy of the Supreme Lord I could actually complete my education,
Right.
and so on. So the akarta means who doesn't think that I am the only doer, who thinks that the primary doer in my life is actually the Supreme Lord. And
Right.
because of only His mercy, I am able to do whatever I am able to do in this life. So that is the akarta. And the pure
Okay.
devotee is always akarta.
Okay. So they are synonymous, you mean?
They are synonymous. Akarta,
Okay.
pure
Okay.
devotee, uttamadhikari. And then you mentioned one more, I think,
Goswami.
a Goswami. A Goswami, one cannot be an akarta if one is not a Goswami. One
Okay.
doesn't have control on the senses. The senses are
Right.
trying to drive towards material enjoyment.
Right. Right.
Material enjoyment is based on the platform of selfishness. I
Right.
want to enjoy. This is for my
Okay.
enjoyment.
Right.
So that is Goswami means, again, if so, in order to become a proper akarta, one has to move away from this practice of sense gratification.
Right.
Goswami.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all are interrelated.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Thank you. Very nice question. Very, I would say, thoughtful question. You are thinking quite deep, I would say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yeah. So any
Hello,
other?
Prabhuji. Prabhuji.
Yes, Manishji.
So you talked about various mutts, correct? So each
Hmm.
one various institutions. So each one will have different devotees, correct? Like we have the ISKCON institution, we have some Ramakrishna mission also. So we have lot many devotees from various mutts or various institutions, yeah, with some different principles. So how should we see them? So we in ISKCON we might be having some different aspects, or they might be speaking something differently, or the Vaishnava tradition might be a little bit different from that what we are learning. So how should we consider them, or how should we treat that kind of aspects?
Yeah. So uh, we should understand the spiritual principles and check the uh, I would say correctness of spiritual teachings on three aspects: Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra.
Mhm.
Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra means if the teaching is coming from proper scriptures, if it is supported by scriptures, that is something we should accept. That teaching is also supported by our spiritual master. That is also correct. And that is not only by spiritual master, but other similar spiritual master in the community also support that teaching. That is the kind of a benchmark to check or to understand the correctness of a spiritual teaching.
Okay. Okay.
And then you can also say that uh, who is a guru? Who is a guru is also something like who is coming from a parampara, who is coming from a tradition.
Mhm.
In Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, Evam parampara praptam rajarshayo vidu. Like that is the verse in Bhagavad Gita. Huh? Evam parampara praptam, where Arjuna asks Lord Krishna that how do you know this knowledge? From where did you get this knowledge? So Lord Krishna says that actually this knowledge was given by me to Sun God Vivaswan, and this
Mhm.
knowledge has been being transferred from one person to the another person in the form of a parampara.
You know. Yeah.
So you should understand that the original knowledge is coming from Lord Krishna,
Mm.
and that knowledge is coming from Lord Krishna in a parampara system. So that parampara has to be there. So whenever you go to a spiritual organization, you should inquire about from which parampara are you. Is
Mhm.
this parampara connected to the Lord? So like in Vaishnava
Okay.
tradition, there are four paramparas. There is a Rudra Sampradaya, there is a Shri Sampradaya. Rudra Sampradaya comes from Lord Shiva, Shri Sampradaya comes from Goddess Lakshmi. Then Kumar Sampradaya. Kumar Sampradaya comes from four Kumaras. And then
Mm.
Brahma Sampradaya. Brahma Sampradaya comes from Lord Brahma. So our ISKCON tradition is coming from Lord Brahma. It is Brahma
Okay.
Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. Brahma means from Lord Brahma, it came to Madhvacharya.
Mm.
Like you saw, our Prime Minister Modi ji has recently inaugurated this Ramanujacharya, uh, one several 100-meter long murti of Shripad Ramanujacharya. Do
Yeah.
you remember that news?
Yes.
So
Yes.
from where Ramanujacharya is coming? Ramanujacharya is coming from Sri Sampradaya, from
Mhm.
Goddess Lakshmi. So Lord Krishna gave this knowledge to Goddess Lakshmi, and from Goddess Lakshmi it is coming from all the way to Shripad Ramanujacharya, and that's where they are known as Sri Vaishnavas. And we have
Okay.
Vasudevan Prabhu in our association. You see the name uh, Vasudevan ji in the list of the devotees.
Yes. Yes.
So Vasudevan Prabhu is actually coming from uh, Shripad Ramanuja's Sampradaya, and
Okay.
then
Okay.
we have Kumar Sampradaya, and we have Sri Brahma Sampradaya. So we are ISKCON is actually coming from Lord Brahma, from Madhvacharya. So like Ramanujacharya, we have our own Acharya known as Sripad Madhvacharya.
Okay.
And then
Okay, Prabhu.
Gaudiya would mean Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So
Mhm.
Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya Sampradaya.
Yeah.
So that is where it is coming from. Now, if you
Okay.
look at the teachings of Sripad Ramanujacharya, you go and read the books from uh, Sri Ramanujacharya Sampradaya or Sri Sampradaya, you will not find any difference. The teachings are
Mhm.
same.
Same.
You go to Vallabh Sampradaya, which is coming from Lord Shiva, the teachings are same.
Mhm.
Same teachings. There might be some minor details, differences in the details, but primarily the overarching principles and teachings are same in all Vaishnava Sampradaya.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So if you inquire that are you from any of these four Vaishnava Sampradaya, if the answer is yes, then please go ahead, accept the teachings.
Okay.
Otherwise there is a danger sign. Like you have that
Mhm.
skull and the crossbones,
Yeah, on the electric pole.
electric pole. So then
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a danger sign. Then it's a
Okay.
danger sign.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much. That was also a very nice question. Any other question or any other topic would like to? Okay. In case there is nothing, then I really appreciate and really feel grateful that all of you took a lot of time to patiently hear this presentation. Thank you very much. So
Yeah. Hare Krishna.
we continue to the
Krishna.
next Sunday with our next topic. So
Hare
I'm
Krishna.
due for a quiz now. I'm due for a quiz. We'll soon issue a quiz on the chapters. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.